A new Google chip that might be pulling power from other universes, particles that could be entangled across different realities, and an entire stack of hidden Earths floating just millimeters away, divided by a dimension we can't see. This is more disturbing evidence alternate versions of Earth exist. Last year, Google pulled off something wild with their new quantum chip called Willow. This chip solved a problem in 5 minutes that would take the supercomputers we have today about 10 septillion years to finish. Hartmut Nevin, the head of Google's quantum AI team, called the result astonishing and said it, quote, lends credence to the notion that quantum computation occurs in many parallel universes. So basically, the idea is that the chip's crazy speed might be explained if calculations are happening across different versions of reality all at the same time. This ties into the many worlds interpretation proposed by physicist David Deutsch, which says that every possible outcome happens somewhere in a multiverse. So in theory, Willow might be tapping into those alternate universes when it solves problems. Unlike regular computers that use zeros and ones, Willow uses qubits, which can hold multiple states at once, letting it handle insanely complex calculations at lightning speed. Imagine you have two specialized coins and you flip them at the exact same time, sending one to New York and keeping the other in London. The moment you look at the coin in London, though, and see it landed on heads, you instantly know the coin in New York is tails, even though no signal or message had time to travel between them. They are entangled. They share a connection that scientists call a shared state. We've talked about this many times before on the channel, but now let's take this to a much bigger scale. Some physicists wonder if this connection could happen not just across space, but across different realities. Maybe the atoms that make up our Earth are somehow entangled with the atoms of a parallel Earth. See, there are mysteries as to how particles behave sometimes. Now, what if when a tiny particle on our Earth does something unpredictable? Well, it might not be random. It could be because it's instantly affecting or being affected by its entangled twin particle in a parallel reality. The unpredictable random little movements we see in the smallest particles of our world could actually be the sign of a constant cause and effect relationship with a parallel Earth. String theory is what physicists come up with when they try to find the ultimate theory of everything. They wanted one single set of math that could explain both the super big stuff, like planets and stars, and the super tiny stuff, like atoms, but they ran into a problem. The math for this theory kept falling apart unless they added a ton of extra dimensions. First, let's nail down what we mean by dimensions. We live in a 4D world, 3 dimensions of space to locate anything, left, right, up, down, forward, and backward, and 1 dimension of time to say when an event happened. That's 4 dimensions we experience. For string theory's equations to work perfectly and make sense, they needed far more than 4 though. They needed 10 or 11 dimensions in total. Why? Well, it all comes down to gravity. When scientists try to describe gravity on the smallest scales, like inside atoms, things get confusing. They calculate that the force of gravity packed into a single tiny point should be endless. Since we don't see endless forces in the real universe, the math just breaks down. String theory fixes that by saying everything is made of tiny, vibrating little strings that make up everything in the universe. Imagine everything in the universe, your chair, the air, you. Well, it's made up of tiny rubber bands. These rubber bands are so small, you can't see them, and they're wiggling and vibrating, kind of like when you pluck a guitar string. How each rubber band wiggles decides what it actually is. One way it wiggles makes it an electron, another way makes it a quark, another way makes it a photon, so on and so on. If the rubber band didn't wiggle, it wouldn't turn into anything. It would just be a useless string. The vibration is what gives particles their identity, so to speak. Different vibrations equals different types of particles. That's why string theory calls it strings, like tiny strings that make everything, but only because they wiggle in that right way. Now, for them to wiggle correctly without breaking the math, they need more space than we can see. That's where the hidden dimensions come in, extra directions for the strings to move so all the particles and forces makes sense. Next up, we have false vacuum decay, a pretty scary idea. This one is less about how a parallel Earth exists and more about how one could replace ours. So say you had a ball sitting in a slight dip on a large table. Right now, the ball looks stable and everything seems fine, but it's not in the lowest, safest spot it could actually be. That's what scientists call a false vacuum. Somewhere else on the table is a deeper, bigger hole, the true vacuum. If the ball somehow gets nudged over the edge of its little dip, it will roll into the deeper hole. Some scientists think our universe might be like that little dip. Here, atoms are stable, life exists, everything is the way it is right now, but it's technically not the most stable state possible. In quantum physics, tiny random fluctuations happen all the time. Usually they don't do anything noticeable, but in theory, one could just be enough to push the universe from the false vacuum into the true vacuum. That wouldn't be good for us. If that happens, it would create a bubble where the rules of physics are completely different. That bubble would expand at nearly the speed of light, instantly changing everything inside. Atoms could fall apart, matter could dissolve, and our universe, as we know it, Earth included of course, would be wiped out and replaced by a completely new reality. Next, we have the string theory multiverse. So scientists have a theory called string theory. Instead of thinking of particles as tiny dots, they imagine them as super tiny vibrating strings. So string theory says that there are more than just the usual 3 dimensions of space and of time that we're used to. Imagine there are extra dimensions, but they're so tiny and curled up that we can't see them in our everyday lives. Mathematicians call these curled up dimensions Calabi-Yau manifolds, which are basically complex shapes used to describe these hidden dimensions. In the world of string theory, these extra dimensions can have different configurations or setups, kind of like multiple radio stations, each playing a different song. In this case, each configuration could represent a different set of physical laws and constants, the rules that govern how things work in our universe. Our universe, in this grand scheme of things, is like tuning into one specific radio station. But according to the string theory multiverse idea, there are countless other stations out there, each playing its own unique tune or each representing a different universe. So why does our universe have the particular rules that it does? The string theory multiverse brings in something called the anthropic principle. The principle says that the reason our universe has the specific laws it does is because those laws allow for the existence of life. If things were different, we wouldn't be here to even ponder it. Our next sciencey theory on the list is quantum entanglement. So let's imagine we have 2 particles. We'll call these particle A and particle B, and these 2 particles become entangled. This means that they're somehow connected in a way that the state of one particle instantly influences the state of the other, no matter how far apart they are. This actually happens. This is very strange because in our everyday understanding of the world, information can't travel faster than the speed of light. But with entanglement, changes in one particle's state seems to happen instantaneously in the other, even if they're light years apart. So how does this relate to the possibility of parallel universes? Well, one idea is that the particles exist in multiple states at the same time until we observe them. And when we observe one particle, it instantly affects the other particle's state, no matter the distance. Some scientists speculate that when we observe one particle and it chooses a particular state, the other particle might be choosing a different state in a parallel universe. Pretty hard to wrap your head around, but alright, this next one is also pretty trippy. See if you can wrap your head around this, because I have a hard time doing so, but the holographic multiverse theory. So for this, we need to imagine that our universe is like a giant 3D movie being projected onto a screen, and that all of that information making up this cosmic movie projection is actually encoded on the surface of that screen. In simple terms, the holographic principle is based on the idea that the information needed to describe a 3-dimensional structure like our universe can be represented in a 2-dimensional way, like a hologram. So essentially, all the details of a 3D object are somehow encoded on a flat surface. So some scientists have suggested that our universe, as we perceive it, might actually be this holographic projection, and this would mean that everything we see around us might be a kind of illusion, and the real action is happening on the screen or the boundary of our universe. So instead of thinking of separate universes with different physical laws, the holographic multiverse suggests that all these universes, including ours, might be interconnected holographic projections, each quote-unquote projection could represent a different set of physical laws, making it seem like its own distinct universe. This would be like having multiple TV screens, each showing a different channel. These channels, or universes, might seem independent, but the information that creates them is all encoded on the same screen. Next, we have probably the most mysterious radio signal ever detected, simply known as the WOW signal. So in 1977, the Ohio State University's radio telescope received a very odd radio signal from outer space that lasted for about 72 seconds. The signal was so unique and unexpected that astronomer Jerry R. Eyman, who was reviewing the data printout, circled the signal and just wrote WOW next to it, hence giving it that name. What made the WOW signal particularly intriguing was its frequency and intensity, which didn't match any known natural source. So what was it? Well, aliens, of course, have always been brought into the conversation, but there's also the idea that the signal might be connected to parallel universes. The signal's characteristics were so unusual that some have suggested it could be a form of communication or energy transmission from a parallel universe. Lastly, we have deja vu. Now, this one is a bit different than everything else on this list, in that it's a phenomenon we all experience relatively frequently that science hasn't been able to give a convincing explanation for, and that's led to a lot of fascinating ideas as to why it happens, including, of course, the existence of parallel universes. I say science hasn't been able to come up with a convincing explanation because, I'm sorry, but no, I do not buy that deja vu is just experiencing something similar to something you've experienced before. That is just the lamest explanation, and it seems to be the only one that the scientific world can come up with. Like, you know what we experience that's very similar day to day? Going to work, waking up, eating foods we've had before, kissing our partner if we're lucky enough to have one. Most of our lives are pretty repetitive day to day, but like, we're not experiencing deja vu on a constant basis. When it pops up, it's noticeable, uncanny to an eerie degree. So what's going on here? Well, one idea is that two parallel universes perfectly line up for a brief moment, and a version of yourself from a parallel universe is in the same exact situation, performing the exact same action at the same time as you. Thus, you get that odd feeling like you've done this before. There's a scientific interpretation of reality that basically says every time something happens, the universe splits, one where it did and one where it didn't. Star Trek The Next Generation covered this in an episode called Parallels. In the science world, though, it's known as the many worlds interpretation, proposed by physicist Hugh Everett in 1957. What he meant was that when a particle could go left or right, it does both, just in different versions of reality. We only experience one. If that's true, there could be a version of Earth where every what if in your life actually happened, good or bad. It could be a world where the dinosaurs never went extinct, another where humans didn't survive the Ice Age. The idea came from quantum mechanics, where particles behave unpredictably until they're observed. Everett argued they never actually choose. All possibilities keep existing, just in separate universes. Most scientists don't think we'll ever detect these other worlds because they don't interact with ours, but it's a neat idea to think there might be endless versions of you out there living completely different lives. The most frustrating part about the many worlds interpretation is that for the longest time, there was no way to test it. It's basically impossible to prove. But over the years, some physicists started thinking maybe we could detect tiny effects from other universes. Back in 1995, a researcher named Rainer Plaga suggested that under the right conditions, particles in our universe might be able to pass minuscule amounts of energy to particles in a parallel one. Later, other scientists like Howard Wiseman and Michael Hall came up with a version of this idea called the many interacting worlds model. The idea is that each universe isn't completely isolated. They might nudge each other just a tiny bit, and that could explain some of the weird, unpredictable behavior we see in particles, which normally looks just random. Instead of being completely chaotic, that randomness could actually be the result of other universes subtly affecting ours, just enough to leave a faint trace in how particles act. There's also an idea called eternal inflation. So imagine the Big Bang was not a single event, but part of a constant process that keeps creating new bubble universes, each expanding in its own space. We just happen to live inside one bubble, surrounded by others we can't see. Now, if these bubbles sometimes collide, those impacts could leave marks. sort of like bruises in our own universe. Cosmologists have looked for this using data from satellites that map the cosmic microwave background, which is the faint radiation that was left over from the Big Bang. A few weird circular patterns have shown up that some researchers think could be scars, so to speak, from an ancient collision between our bubble and another. Of course, they can't say for sure, but it is a possibility. Back in 2015, a cosmologist named Ranga Ramshari found something while analyzing data from the Planck telescope, which measures leftover radiation from the Big Bang. He noticed certain areas that were 4,500 times brighter than expected. He suggested, cautiously, that this could be evidence of another universe overlapping with ours. Kind of like we just talked about, bubbles rubbing up on each other and exchanging material. Basically, the energy from that contact could have left behind these glowing marks. And it's interesting because these bright areas were very specific. Didn't line up with any known galaxies or star clusters. I mean, there could be other explanations, sure, but just think about how cool it would be if what we're actually seeing faint signs of another universe, light leading through from somewhere else. And that's not all on this topic. Along with oddly bright patches, they've also noticed an oddly cold spot. Scientists have been looking into it for years. They call it, see if you can guess, the cold spot. This one area is significantly colder than the rest, and it's way too large to easily explain. Some researchers think it might be caused by a massive void in space, a region where there are just less galaxies, meaning less radiation. But others have floated another idea, one that's a lot more tantalizing. That this cold spot could be another sign of a collision with a parallel universe. The hypothesis is that if two universes brushed against each other early on, that contact could have created a cooler, distorted area we can still spot today. Satellite missions like the Wilkinson Microwave Anisotropy Probe and Planck both confirmed the cold spot does exist, but no one agrees on what actually caused it. So for now, one of the most logical explanations might actually involve another universe, which is pretty cool. When scientists first mapped the faint radiation left over from the Big Bang, they expected it to look like random noise. Every direction of the sky should have been more or less the same, because the early universe was supposed to be uniform, but that's not what they found. There's this odd pattern in the data called the axis of evil. Basically, some of the largest patterns in that radiation map seem to line up in the same direction, and strangely enough, that direction matches the flat plane of our solar system, the same plane our planets orbit on. In theory, that shouldn't happen. Our solar system is tiny and it formed billions of years after the Big Bang, so you wouldn't think it would have any connection to that ancient light. Some scientists have an interesting idea about this, that maybe there's some kind of external force, something beyond what we can see, that's shaping the very structure of the universe itself. Obviously, no one's proven this yet, but the fact that the pattern even exists is pretty strange. The name Axis of Evil came from how unnerving the pattern was when it was first discovered, like some invisible hand was tugging the universe in a specific direction. One thing is for certain though, this seems to go against one of the most basic assumptions in cosmology, that the universe is the same everywhere. And if that's not true, it opens the door to a lot of strange possibilities. Imagine math isn't just a tool we use to describe the universe, but the math is the universe. That's the core idea proposed by physicist Max Tegmark. Think about how many video games can be designed. You can design one where gravity is so strong, one where it's weak, one where the characters can fly, one where they can't, yada yada. Every single game is based on a different set of mathematical rules. Tegmark suggests that every single possible set of consistent mathematical rules doesn't just describe a universe, it is a universe, and that all of these unique equations make up their own alternate universes. Our Earth, the one we live on, is an example of one of these mathematical structures. It's a universe where gravity follows a specific formula, light travels at a specific speed, but there could be an infinite number of other Earths and universes with different mathematical rules that are just as real. Now let's talk quantum immortality. Remember the many worlds interpretation, the idea that every time a decision is made, the universe splits into different possibilities? Now let's apply that to your life. Imagine you are in a situation with a 50-50 chance of survival, like a very dangerous surgery. The moment the choice is made by the universe, essentially, you live or you die, the universe splits into two. One timeline where you survive, wake up, and one where you didn't make it. The concept of quantum immortality suggests, though, that the version of you that is conscious, will always find itself in the timeline where you survived. You can never experience your own death because the act of observing yourself dying pushes your consciousness into the branch of reality where you lived. So, in a sense, you survive every single fatal accident, every close call, every life-threatening disease, forever jumping from one parallel Earth to the next, always finding the reality where you lived to see the next moment. A pretty comforting thought. And I am not responsible for any reckless risks you decide to take with this information in mind. Please don't do that. When astronomers look at super distant galaxies, they notice something weird about their light. It's redshifted. What does that mean? Well, when a light wave leaves a distant galaxy, it's like a tightly coiled spring. As that light travels toward us across billions of light years, its waves get stretched out. And when light waves are stretched, they shift toward the red end of the color spectrum. That's redshift. The standard accepted explanation for this is that the entire universe is expanding. As the light travels, the empty spaces moving through gets stretched out, which in turn stretches the light waves and makes them appear red. But way back, there was a competing idea called tired light. The idea here was that the universe wasn't expanding, instead the light was just losing energy on its long journey. Here's why losing energy makes it look red. Light color is directly tied to its energy. Red light has less energy than blue light. If light starts its journey as energetic blue light and then slowly loses energy over long distances, it would eventually look like lower energy red light when it finally gets to us, almost like it's getting tired, for lack of a better word. But here's where an alternate universe comes in. What if the light isn't tired from age, but it's actually being drained of its energy by something we can't see? Some think that our visible universe is constantly surrounded by a sea of what's called mirror matter, the same stuff that would make up a mirror Earth. This matter doesn't interact with our light or our forces directly, but it could be affecting light as it passes through it, draining its energy. This energy drain would make the light appear redshifted or tired. When you're watching leaves floating on a pond, there's no wind, the leaves will still drift in different directions by themselves. That's what scientists expected galaxies to do, move around sort of randomly because of stuff nearby pulling on them. Imagine hundreds of those leaves suddenly all start sliding the same way toward the same shore as if something is pulling on them, only there's no current or wind causing it. Astronomers have seen this with giant groups of galaxies. Instead of drifting every which way, lots of them were all moving together in one direction. So what's going on? Well, some scientists think that way beyond the edge of the part of the universe we can see is pulling. Maybe the edge of another universe. And finally, we have the recursive universe, the idea that the universe and all its parallel Earths is an infinitely repeating pattern. We know that when a very large star dies, its gravity is so intense that it collapses into a black hole. A black hole is a region of space where gravity is so strong that nothing, even light, can escape. The recursive universe theory suggests that the matter that collapses into a black hole might not be destroyed. Instead, the physics inside the black hole cause it to re-expand and become a new self-contained universe. Think of it almost like a Russian nesting doll. Our entire universe, with all its galaxies and planets and our Earth, might have been born from a black hole that exists in a parent universe that we can't see. And if that's true, then our universe may also be constantly creating new universes inside the black holes it forms. Inside the black hole, the center of our Milky Way galaxy, an infant universe could be forming right now, completely cut off and unaware of its parent, our universe. The North settled in Greenland around the 10th century, creating a colony that lasted for about 500 years. But then, in the late 15th century, they vanished. Now, it's not like it was uncommon for people to relocate back then, but what was strange about this was that they'd left behind a lot of their supplies and belongings. It was like they just evaporated. Historians and archaeologists still haven't come up with a clear answer. But there are theories. One is that environmental changes made life too hard for them, forcing the settlers to leave. Another is that local Inuits may have raided the colony, killing or capturing the settlers, but there weren't any clear signs of an attack. Everything had been left in a pretty tidy manner. If the Inuit had raided the colony, there would have been signs of a struggle, but the site had been found neat and intact. There's also the theory that a plague in the late 15th century, which hit Iceland and Norway, left many farms empty, meaning the Greenland settlers might have returned to Europe to claim the abandoned land, but that doesn't make much sense either. I mean, the Vikings back home would have known that these guys had returned. There wouldn't be much of a mystery, would there? This is a very strange case. Sacsayhuaman is an impressive Incan fort built in the 1400s, just outside of Cusco, Peru. The fort is famous for its massive stone walls, made from stones that each weigh around 100 to 120 tons. What's even more amazing, though, is how these stones fit together, which is perfectly. They also have these smooth finishes, almost like they were melted and then hardened again in a giant kiln. But back then there was no way they could have had a kiln big enough to do something like that. Researchers have been trying to figure out how the Incas managed to mold these stones for years. Some think they might have used mirrors or glass to focus sunlight and heat the stones until they were soft enough to fit together, but there's no evidence of a method like that having been used. Others have theorized that the stones may have been rough at first and then natural fires partially melted them together, but tests have shown that regular fires don't really get hot enough to melt the stone. Here's a theory for you. Maybe the Incas had some kind of a deal with a race of stone carving aliens, but I had to do it. In Jordan and Syria, there are mysterious stone circles spread across the desert plains. Some of these circles are huge. The smallest is about 720 feet wide, and the largest is more than 1,450 feet across. They're all between 3 and 5 feet high, and none of them have any openings or entrances, which is strange because if they'd been used to, say, house animals, you'd think there'd be doors or gates. By that same token, they don't really seem to have been used as burial sites either. The circles are incredibly well formed though, almost perfectly round, which is surprising given how old they are. Archaeologists think they were built between 4500 BC and 2000 BC, a span of about 2500 years, which really doesn't narrow down their purpose much. Researchers believe there were once even more of these strange stone circles, but many have been destroyed as new towns and settlements were built. Scientists are still trying to figure out why they were used and who built them. There's also a strange circle of stones in Miami. In 1998, while preparing to build new condos in South Beach, developers came across something they'd never seen before. As they were tearing down old buildings and digging deep into the ground, they discovered a circle of 24 large holes, each filled with heavy limestone tablets. This discovery was so unusual that they had to call in archaeologists to investigate. The archaeologists found that these stones were arranged in a perfect circle, about 38 feet across. They also uncovered other ancient items like animal bones, shark teeth, and old axe heads made of basalt rock. After studying the area, the experts estimated that the Miami Circle was about 2,000 years old. The circle is believed to have been created by the Tequesta people, a tribe that lived in the region until the early 18th century. The Tequesta were known to be nomadic. Today, the Miami Circle sits right in the middle of the city. Researchers are still studying the site and the artifacts, but the purpose of the circle and even a lot about the Tequesta themselves still a mystery. Alright, this story is one of the wildest and most mysterious tales from World War II. So in October of 1943 at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, the Navy was working on a top secret project to make ships invisible to enemy radar. The ship at the center of all this was the USS Eldridge. The story goes that they were using some kind of high-tech equipment involving powerful electromagnetic fields. When they turned on this equipment, something bizarre happened. The ship disappeared. Not just off radar, but physically vanished from sight. Some say it was teleported to Norfolk, Virginia, and then brought back to Philadelphia in just a few minutes. But the strangest part is what happened to the crew. When the ship reappeared, some sailors had been fused into the ship's metal. Others had gone missing entirely. The tale first came about in 1955 when a man named Carl Allen, who claimed to be a witness, sent a series of letters to a US Navy research organization and a UFO researcher. Of course, the Navy denies that the experiment ever took place, and the letters are often chalked up to a very creative hoax. But there is a small chance something really did happen that day. I mean, hey, who knows? None of us were there. The story of John Zagreus is often referenced as one of the eeriest examples of an alternate reality crossing over into our own, at least in some versions of the story. Anyway, yeah, this one falls into the realm of urban legends, but it is a pretty great story all the same. The story goes that in 1954, at Tokyo's Haneda Airport, a man handed over his passport, leaving the officials in utter confusion. His passport was from a country called Torrid. If you're wondering what Torrid is, well, it doesn't exist. They looked at the man, and he seemed completely normal. He was well dressed and polite, but he insisted that Torrid was a real country located between France and Spain, and he was shocked when the officials told him that that place just didn't exist. The man had other documents too, like a driver's license and bank statements, all from this place called Torrid. His passport even had stamps showing he had traveled to other countries before. The officials were just completely baffled. They checked maps and globes, and they were like, are we just crazy? But no, there was no Torrid. They put him in a nearby hotel while they investigated further, and they posted guards outside his room just to make sure he didn't leave. But when they went in to check on him the next morning, he'd disappeared. The room was on a high floor, no balcony, and the guards swore they didn't see or hear anything strange during the night. His documents also disappeared, leaving no trace of the mysterious man from Torrid. No one could figure out where he came from or where he went. So where does John Zagreus come into the picture? Well, there is a documented case of a foreign man being detained in Japan for identity fraud, but it's never been 100% verified if John Zagreus' story spawned the legend of the Torrid man or if his case was completely unrelated. There's also an idea in cosmology that if another universe ever collided with ours, it would leave behind a kind of wake, kind of like a boat cutting through water. The waves that spread out after are the cosmic equivalent of what might happen if two universes brushed against each other during the expansion of the Big Bang. Physicists Matthew Klebin, Thomas Levy, and Chris Sigurdsson have modeled what that wake might look like. They don't think it'd be an explosion or a visible scar. Instead, it would show up as faint, disc-shaped pattern in the cosmic microwave background, maybe even changing the way galaxies formed across space. So far, nothing's confirmed, but just the idea alone is exciting, especially when you consider this is a real hypothesis being studied by serious physicists. If they ever find one of those hypothetical wakes, that would be the first measurable sign that our universe may not be alone. One of the strangest ideas out there isn't about another universe exactly, but a kind of copy of our own, one that's invisible to us. Some physicists call it the mirror world. In this version, every particle we know has a hidden twin, so to speak, made of mirror matter that wouldn't reflect light or react to anything the way normal matter does. The only thing connecting it to us would be gravity. There could be a mirror Earth orbiting a mirror sun, or right now, completely undetectable. This idea actually came up while scientists were trying to explain the Hubble tension, a problem where different methods give slightly different measurements for how fast the universe is expanding. A 2022 paper from scientists at the University of New Mexico proposed that if a mirror world exists, its gravity might subtly affect our universe, enough to explain the different measurements. If that's true, there could be a whole hidden universe existing right on top of ours without ever bumping into it. We wouldn't be able to see it, but its gravity might still pull on things in our universe, possibly affecting how galaxies move or how space itself is shaped. In Antarctica, a balloon experiment called ANITA, which stands for the Antarctic Impulsive Transient Antenna, was designed to detect cosmic rays, high-energy particles that hit Earth from space. But a few years ago, ANITA picked up something that didn't seem to make any sense. It detected ultra-high energy particles coming up through the Earth, as if they'd passed straight through the planet. Scientists had never seen anything like this before, and when ANITA kept picking up the same weird signals, scientists started throwing out some pretty trippy-sounding ideas to explain it. One was that the particles weren't from our universe at all, that they might have come from a parallel universe, one created at the same time as ours in the Big Bang, but moving in the opposite direction through time. But why would they think time would be moving in the opposite direction here? Well, the idea comes from how the math behind the Big Bang works. It's symmetrical, meaning if you flipped it backward in time, the equations would still hold up. Some scientists think it could mean the Big Bang created not one, but two universes. Ours, where time moves forward, another where time flows the other way. In their perspective, we'd be the ones going backward, of course. What does this have to do with the odd particles moving up through the Earth, though? Well, Anita's data caught scientists' attention because the particles seemed to be moving in a way that just doesn't fit with how things work in our universe. So a few scientists suggested maybe those particles were actually crossing over, traveling from that universe into ours. One of the most basic assumptions in cosmology is that the universe looks the same in every direction. That's what scientists call isotropic. But when scientists look closely at the distribution of galaxies and radiation, there are hints that it's not perfectly uniform. There's a small but obvious directional tilt. The universe seems to be slightly lopsided. A few studies have found something called dipolar modulation, meaning one side of the sky looks just a bit different from the other. That shouldn't happen if the universe expanded evenly after the Big Bang. And some researchers think it might mean we're seeing the effects of something. What? Can't say for sure, but it could mean that the part of the universe we can see is not completely isolated. In other words, there might be stuff just outside our observable universe that's massive enough to pull on galaxies inside our area. This has become a rather infamous story on Reddit. Always reminds me of the Star Trek The Next Generation episode Inner Light. So this guy takes a hit to the head and blacks out. But instead of being out for a few seconds, the guy ends up living what feels like 10 full years in a completely different life, entirely in his head, of course. In this other version of reality, he meets a woman, falls in love, settles down, starts a family. They go grocery shopping, they argue about bills, they play with their kids in the yard. He remembers what the weather was like, he remembers birthdays. I mean, we're talking real grounded stuff here. This doesn't sound like the type of wacky nonsense that goes on in dreams. Felt like real life. 10 years of it, mind you. But one day in that world, he starts noticing something strange. There's this lamp in the living room, totally normal looking, but it doesn't fit. It starts bugging him. It's like a little glitch. And the more he stares at it, the more everything else starts to feel wrong. And that's when it all starts unraveling. Suddenly he wakes up. He's lying on the ground, surrounded by people. He's back where he was right before he blacked out. Only minutes have passed. But the man is absolutely devastated. The life he just came back to doesn't feel right anymore. He remembers his wife and kids from the other world. He misses them. They weren't real though, but the emotions were. For a long time after, he struggled. He said it felt like he was mourning people who never existed. Now, was this a case of the brain doing weird things under stress? Or did he tap into something else, a different version of his life that's playing out somewhere, a parallel universe? Ken Korczak, a writer and journalist, had one of the most bizarre experiences, writing an article claiming that he'd slipped into a parallel universe. It wasn't like a whole new world, just a slightly different version of his own home and garden. He said the differences were subtle at first. His pets, specifically his cats and chickens, were behaving completely differently than he was used to. It's like they were the same animals, but something was just off about them, like seeing them through a different lens. In his words, it felt like everything in his yard was a few degrees askew. But the weirdest part came when he met this strange female entity. She wasn't human, at least not in the way you'd think. Korczak described her as resembling an elf or a fairy, and she seemed completely at home in this alternate reality. He also described feeling like she was there for a reason, like she was some kind of guide in this parallel world. He spent a lot of time reflecting on it, especially the strange, almost magical feeling of meeting this being. He genuinely believes that he had a real encounter with a parallel version of his home. As someone who's always been interested in the concept of alternate realities too, he dove deep, trying to make sense of it. Was this just a hallucination, or did he actually slip into another dimension for a brief moment? In December of 2024, Google made a pretty big announcement about their new quantum chip, Willow. This chip solved a problem in 5 minutes that would have taken even the fastest supercomputers 47 years. What was amazing here though wasn't just how fast the chip was, it's also what the head of Google's quantum AI team, Hartmut Nevins, said about it. He mentioned that this speed might be a sign that their quantum computers are pulling from multiple realities at once. Not just a throwaway comment, he was serious about this. Now, this ties in with something called the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, which states that every decision or event causes the universe to split into different versions, creating a parallel reality for each possibility. So when a quantum computer like Willow does a calculation, it's possible that it's tapping into these other universes, running all the possibilities at once, without us even realizing it. And it's not just Google talking along these lines. Other tech companies like IBM and D-Wave have been exploring quantum computing for years, and some think this technology could eventually lead us to understand or even interact with alternate realities. It's not quite science fiction anymore. Quantum computing might be the closest thing we've got to real-world proof that the multiverse could exist. So it's a sweltering day in July of 1954 at Tokyo's Haneda Airport. A man arrives on an international flight and walks up to customs. Everything seems routine. He looks European, speaks multiple languages, and has a legit-looking passport, from a distance that is. Looking at it up close, turns out this passport says he's from a country called Torrid. Never heard of it? Neither had the Japanese officials. They ask him to point it out on a map, and without hesitation he points to the area around where Andorra is, between France and Spain. But he's confused. He insists Torrid has been a country for over 1,000 years. The customs officers are confused, to say the least. Is this a joke? Is the guy just out of his mind? The guy seems just as confused as they are. His passport has stamps from other countries, including past visits to Japan, and he has multiple currencies in his wallet. He even mentions a business trip and says he's got meetings set up with a company in Tokyo, but when the officials call the company, they say they've never heard of him. Same story with the hotel that he claimed to have booked. At this point, they're really not sure what to do with him, so they put him up in a hotel room under guard for the night while they try to figure things out. But by the next morning, he's gone. The room was locked from the outside. There was no way out, at least none that the guards wouldn't have been able to see. To this day, no one knows who he was or where he came from, really. Some think he slipped into our world from another reality and then slipped right back out. Others think this whole story is just a good old-fashioned urban legend, but if we seriously consider the possibility that the multiverse really is a thing, well then this story starts to sound a little less outlandish. Alright, y'all know I love my cryptids, and these just might be the coolest cryptids I've ever heard of. Neo-dinosaurs. I had never heard about these till fairly recently. These are exactly what they sound like, sightings of dinosaurs in modern times. And yes, there have been multiple sightings of these things in the Amazon basin, in Bolivia, Colombia, Peru, and Brazil. The most common type of neo-dinosaur reported in the Amazon is a large, long-necked amphibious animal that looks a lot like a sauropod. Then there are ones that look like iguanodons, and less frequently bipedal reptiles similar to Allosaurus. There have been tracks discovered that look like dinosaur-type footprints and actual sightings of the creatures themselves, if you can believe it, which most of you I'm sure can't. Fair play. One of the famous tales of these creatures comes from the British archaeologist and explorer Percy Fawcett. That's the guy who claimed to have found the lost city of Z. He claimed to have found these three-toed tracks in the forests of Brazil, and a friend of Fawcett claimed to have seen a large, long-necked reptile near the Brazil-Bolivia border. There were also reports of an iguanodon-like creature in Colombia in 1921, and a Brazilian named Alvaro Mesquita reported encountering a camptosaur-like animal on the shore of a swampy lake between the Purus River and the Juara River. And even as recently as 1995, geology students in Brazil's Sincora Mountains reported seeing two large creatures about 30 feet long with 8-foot necks and tails bathing in a river. Very bizarre. And I can understand why some people may not believe this. I just think it's a really cool idea. One of the most awe-inspiring and well-documented UFO sightings came in 1997. It was March 13th in Arizona, a clear, starry night. People were just going about their usual business when, out of nowhere, strange lights started to appear in the sky. And no, they were not stars. First, there was this V-shaped formation of 5 lights slowly gliding across the state. The lights were first spotted in the town of Henderson, Nevada, around 7:55 p.m., and from there they made their way to Arizona, passing over Prescott and heading towards Phoenix. As the lights moved, more and more people saw them. Hundreds, maybe even thousands, looked up and saw this weird, silent, glowing formation. Some folks described it as a massive, solid object, blocking out the stars as it passed. The police were flooded with reports. Phone lines were lighting up in news and radio stations, and the odd V-shaped craft wasn't the only one reported. A police officer in Paulden, Arizona would report seeing a cluster of orange-colored lights. And later, around 10 p.m., there were a number of reports in the Phoenix area of a row of brilliant lights hovering in the sky, or slowly falling. It later came out that the Air National Guard had been carrying out test flights that night, but people were skeptical, and till this day, people still don't buy the official explanation. As for why that is, well, we could do a whole video on this case, but essentially, the military said one of the light formations was a plane, and the other sets of lights were flares, and it just didn't look like that. The story of the Orang Medan is one of the creepiest and most mysterious sea tales out there. It all started in 1947 when a distress call came in from a Dutch freighter named the SS Orang Medan. The message: all officers, including the captain, are dead, lying in chart room and bridge, possibly whole crew dead. Then there was some garbled Morse code, followed by the final words, "I die," which has always creeped me out. Rescue ships were quickly sent to check things out. When they boarded the ship, though, they found that the entire crew was indeed dead. Their bodies were scattered around the ship. Their faces were frozen in expressions of pure terror, and their arms were reaching out like they'd been trying to fight something off. There were no signs of physical injuries, though. The rescuers didn't have much time to figure things out either. Shortly after they arrived, a fire broke out in the ship's cargo hold. They had to abandon the vessel, which then exploded, sinking into the depths of the ocean. And another one of the most mysterious maritime tales in history is, of course, the case of the Mary Celeste. On December 4th of 1872, a ship called the Mary Celeste was found floating in the Atlantic Ocean. It was found completely empty of people, anyway. All the cargo, the food supplies, and the crew's belongings, they were all still in place. All that was missing was a single lifeboat. The Mary Celeste had left New York about a month earlier, led by Captain Benjamin Briggs. He was traveling with his wife, his young daughter, and 7 crew. The ship was headed for Italy. Now, everything seemed normal during the journey, and that's because we have the log entries. The last entry in the logbook, too, was just a regular note about the ship's position and weather. There were no clues in these logs about any sign of trouble. There was no sign of a struggle or any kind of damage to the ship. It looked like everyone had just calmly left in the lifeboat. But why? The weather was fine, the ship was in good shape. It was unlikely that pirates had attacked either, because again, nothing had been stolen, and there were no signs of violence. To this day, nobody knows what happened to Captain Briggs, his family, or the crew.
All possible answers to this fantastical theory. Noah, the alleged time traveler from 2030. Back in 2018, this guy had taken the world by storm. Although supposedly being from 2030, he's traveled all across the spectrum to the years 2060, 1999, and the year 2120, to which he also supposedly had video proof of what it would all look like. He explains that the clip he took was from Las Vegas and showcases flying cars to tall, futuristic looking buildings, and a very peculiar looking orange sky. Noah explained, "The red clouds are global warming. You can see it's everywhere. I can remember it being incredibly hot. I'm pretty sure they are working on it in the future." He also stated that some really crazy predictions for the future, some key ones being Martin Luther King Jr.'s granddaughter will become president, scientists live on Mars, Instagram becoming a thing of the past, cures for illnesses, and finally being able to talk to aliens. Noah also disclosed taking anti-aging pills that keep him the same age throughout his journeys, since he claims that time traveling makes you gain years. Of course, no one really believed any of this, especially with the video, to most people looking like a cheap 3D rendering. One commenter even pointed out that he's using a phone from our time to show this, rather than some crazy futuristic one. Despite all this though, he took a lie detector test that really put him on the radar, and he passed it with flying colors. What he was saying came out truthfully. But then again, this wasn't done by professionals or with professional equipment, so who's to say if it means it's actually true? The deja vu vu and parallel universe theory. I had speculated this theory for a few years now, and I'm really happy that other people are discussing it. Majority of us know what déjà vu is. A moment in our lives where we get this strange feeling that we've done something like this before. It's French for already seen, and there are some scientific theories for why this happens, such as temporal overlap. This is when the long-term and short-term memories blur together for a moment. Or subconscious familiarity, where your new surroundings have some similarities to an old one. The last being neural delays that create a false feeling that some event has occurred. But I like parallel universes theory better. To explain my favorite version of the theory, a déjà vu is when your other self in a different universe and you in this universe accidentally overlap the same timelines. The two of you are living very different experiences, but for some reason we have one, or a few if you're like me, moments in time where the two timelines collide at the exact perfect moment. Our lives perfectly linked up together based on whatever choices we made to get us in that exact same moment of time. I would also love to hear your theories about this down in the comments below. This is a great way to transition into the mirror image universe theory. It could also link to the déjà vu theory, but this theory specifically focuses on the moments before the Big Bang, and scientists coming up with a hypothesis that there was a universe completely mirror image to our version today. However, the only difference is that time is moving backwards in that universe. I'm not going to try and get deep with it, but the basic understanding of this theory is that the Big Bang is the center point of time, and because scientists believe in heavy symmetry within the universe, when it happened, it also created a negative version of time of our universe alongside ours. So, when you think of cracking an egg, what would happen instead in the other universe is that it would start out from the yolk on the ground and turn back into the egg. This theory started back in 2015, when some scientists were up in Antarctica researching high-energy particles. What we did know before is that there are high-energy particles coming towards Earth, which from my understanding is because our universe is constantly expanding outward. However, they discovered high-energy particles going away from our Earth in the opposite direction, as if they were going back in time. There was something pulling or stretching these particles the opposite way, as if the universe is expanding in another direction simultaneously.
The Marcahuasi Stone Forest in Peru is one of those places that seems to have a ton of weird stuff happening. People have been talking about strange occurrences there for years, mostly because the place is filled with these huge stone structures that look like they belong to some ancient civilization. But there are also some strange stories surrounding this place. Well, one goes that a group of hikers got a lot more than they bargained for when they camped here. While hanging out, they started to hear some music coming from what seemed like a cabin in the middle of nowhere. It sounded like a celebration. The group looked around, and sure enough, they spotted a stone cabin lit up from the inside, and they could see people dancing through the windows. The people were dressed like they were from the 1600s, all in old-fashioned clothes. Naturally, one of the hikers decided to check things out. She got closer to the cabin, and the closer she got, the stranger things became. Her friend noticed that she was acting off, like her body was stiff and she wasn't walking right. Got even weirder when she suddenly couldn't move her arm, like she was partially paralyzed. They managed to pull her away from the cabin, and she snapped out of it right away. People who know the area say the Marcahuasi might be some kind of doorway between dimensions or timelines. The idea is that certain spots on Earth might have thin barriers to other worlds, and that cabin could have been a glimpse into some different time. This story comes from a Reddit user named Albert Norman 2069, who shared an experience that left him questioning everything about the world. It had all started on June 28, 2014, a day that seemed normal at first. He'd woken up, brushed his teeth, ate breakfast, and headed out to work. But as he turned on the car radio, something wasn't right. Instead of the usual music, the station was airing a talk show. The host was excitedly talking about something called Victory in the Great War, and praising the troops for their role in this victory. At first, the Redditor thought maybe it was some kind of special segment, but the more the host went on, the stranger things got. There was talk of a victory in Italy, and something about the Second Great Depression finally coming to an end. He was confused, but he ended up brushing things off. It was probably just fictional. But then things started getting even stranger when he was at work. During lunch, He overheard his coworkers talking about the same victory in Italy, and they kept mentioning the numbers 33 to 13. When he asked what they were talking about, they acted like he was the odd one for not knowing. And when he asked about a coworker named Sam, who didn't seem to be there, no one seemed to remember it. At least something was very off. On his way home, he decided to take a different route to avoid traffic, and that's when he noticed that the city looked worse than he remembered. Buildings were crumbling, some were abandoned, and there were banners everywhere again celebrating this mysterious victory. When he finally got home, he flicked on the news. The anchors were talking about the victory in Italy and how the US was dealing with a war abroad. Europe was also in chaos, and the US was in an even worse depression than the 1930s. Of course, things went back to normal by the next day. So was it just a really vivid dream? Well, possibly. But perhaps Albert Norman 2069 really did spend a day in a much darker version of our own reality. Next up are some pretty strange cave paintings, the Wanginas, some of the most mysterious and downright eerie cave art on Earth. These ancient paintings are found in the Kimberley region of northwestern Australia, painted by Aboriginal tribes whose culture has been going strong for over 60,000 years. The Wanginas, according to legend, were sky beings, spirits from the clouds who came down during dream time, said to be this time when the Earth was still being formed. These beings supposedly created the land, animals, people, everything. They taught the Aboriginals how to live, and then they vanished. Some say they returned to the stars, others say they went underground. But, I mean, just look at these cave paintings, the big black eyes, the pale skin, they look like aliens. But this art is estimated to be tens of thousands of years old, long before anyone was talking about aliens, at least not in the modern sense. Kinda makes you wonder, are the Wanginas more than just myth? Did these ancient tribes actually encounter something from beyond the stars, or maybe even from a parallel reality? This final story comes from Reddit user GoodResolve33 and goes as follows. When I was younger, my cousins and I would play in my aunt's basement during major holiday parties. Parents would be upstairs and we would all just hang out and mess around in the basement, entertaining ourselves with whatever junk was down there. Well, there was a metal door down there with a bolt lock that we never touched. But one day, we unlocked the door and we saw a major boxing event going on. I'm talking Jumbotron, bright lights, arena, and a major crowd. Everything seemed to freeze when we opened the door though. People in the crowd turned around to look at us. Fighters stopped fighting, the referee signaled us out, and we saw shadows in the crowd running toward us. It all sounds crazy, but I remember how scared we were. We shut the door, ran upstairs, and sat in the living room with our parents. I remember them being like, "What's going on with these guys?" As we sat in the living room silent, crapping ourselves because we thought we were going to get in trouble. Fast forward to much later, I tried to tell my parents, and they swear that I imagined it. I thought I did too for the longest time, until randomly, one of my cousins from that day hit me up after so long of not communicating, only to bring up that same event, detail for detail as I described and remembered it. I go back to that house to check out the door. Across the door is the neighbor's basement door, since it was a duplex, and stairs leading up the metal basement doors that come out to the backyard. Not sure what the F that was, and I promise you I'm not that crazy. I get goosebumps thinking about the situation sometimes because it makes absolutely zero sense. One of the strangest phenomena caught in camera is the double sun effect. Basically, people have filmed what looks like two suns in the sky, and while this could be an optical illusion, some people think there could be something else going on. That what we're actually seeing is a glimpse into a parallel universe or an alternate reality. Jim Kaller, an astronomer at the University of Illinois, explains that the double sun is likely an optical refraction, but he calls it a, quote, pretty darn rare one, and admits that it's not fully explained by science, saying, "I doubt it's been computer modeled. There must have been some blob of atmosphere somewhere that caused this truly spectacular phenomenon, which in a sense is a mirage," end quote. Now, typically mirages happen when particles in the air bend light, but they're usually vertically aligned with the light source, not side by side like this double sun effect sometimes is. Kaller thinks that it could be a thick patch of atmosphere moving in front of the sun. There's even a historical reference to this in a book called Light and Color in the Outdoors by Flemish astronomer Marcel Meniart. He describes double sun phenomena in such detail that it almost matches the modern sightings. He wrote, "So many other instances have been reported reported that there is no longer any doubt about observations of sun and mock suns being at exactly the same altitude. But even with all this, experts still aren't sure what exactly causes this effect. Grant Perry, an atmospheric scientist, said, "This is not a common optical phenomenon that we're seeing here. It's definitely one of those effects that leaves you wondering, could we be seeing something more than just an optical illusion?" Imagine for a minute, if you will, that you've just died in a freak accident. Suddenly you open your eyes and an entity is standing over you explaining that you're dead, but has given you the opportunity to travel back in time to a universe running parallel to your own in order to save yourself from dying. Of course, what I've just outlined here is complete fantasy, but many people have watched this video here and conjured up similar ideas and stories. In this CCTV footage, we see two men walking down the street at night. Two men who look pretty similar, mind you, both wearing dark clothing, both around the same height, same male pattern baldness. Now the man trailing behind catches up to the dude in front and taps him on the shoulder just as a car passes, and then out of nowhere, this metal object swings out just in time for the guy to jump out of the way. If he hadn't received that warning tap on the shoulder, the thing would have plowed right into him. Now, there's a lot to unpack with this video. First of all, and what most people point out immediately about this video, is the fact that the guy who gives the warning tap seems to know what's about to happen. He doesn't look back and react like, oh god, we're about to be hit, I better warn this guy. No, he doesn't even seem concerned with his own safety at all. He just is always looking forward, taps the guy, totally calm, almost as if he's experienced this before. He also doesn't stick around, doesn't look at the guy directly, just taps him and then moves on, almost like he doesn't want to be seen. But why wouldn't he want the other guy to see his face? Why the hurry to get away? Well, the fun theory, of course, that started to spread online is that the dude who gave the tap is a time traveler, possibly even a future version of the dude who nearly got hit. Now, is this the only explanation? Well, of course not, but it's a fun idea, and I think there's enough strangeness about this video that it's not easy to chalk up to mere coincidence. Even if there's nothing extraordinary about this video, it's pretty miraculous how this man was mere inches from death. The multiverse theory may actually have some observational science evidence behind it. Scientists at the European Space Agency Planck Orbital Observatory have been studying something called CMB, or cosmic microwave background radiation. This radiation is left over from the early super hot stages of our universe. Now, back in 2010, a team from the UK, Canada, and the US discovered 4 strange circular patterns in the CMB. It's not clear what these patterns mean, but one cool idea is that they could be the result of our universe bumping into another one. In 2015, another scientist at the European Space Agency, Rand Ramchari, made a similar discovery. He took a model of the CMB and removed everything we know, like stars, gas, and dust, and expected the image to be pretty much blank. But when he did that, it wasn't blank at all. Chari found areas of the sky that were 4,500 times brighter than they should have been. His theory, those light patches could be imprints from a collision between our universe and another one. Let's talk about one of the most talked about photographs of all time, at least when it comes to the strange and unexplained. In 1941, a photo was snapped at the reopening of the South Fork Bridge in Goldbridge, British Columbia. At first glance, this looks like your typical historical photo. It's black and white. People are dressed in 40s clothes, old school cameras, all that stuff. But wait, there's one guy in the photo who immediately catches your eye. He's wearing more modern looking sunglasses, a printed t-shirt, and holding what looks like a camera that's too small for the time. People online have gone wild with the idea that this guy was a time traveler who slipped into the past wearing clothes from the future. A hipster from today somehow stuck in the middle of a 1940s photo. A pretty wild and far-fetched idea, and of course some people have tried to debunk this one, saying the sunglasses were actually a style from the 1920s. The printed t-shirt, well, on closer look, turns out it's just a sweater with a sports emblem on it. As for his camera, it was smaller than most, but portable cameras did exist back then. Boring, right? Well, Sure, maybe all of that makes sense, but it doesn't stop people from wondering. Cause the guy does just stick out like a sore thumb, and at the end of the day, there's no way we can really know for sure.
Let's take a brain breather with some Mandela effects. This one, specifically from Toy Story, is new to me. Do you remember Woody's catchphrase being, "There's a snake in my boot"? Because that's how I remember it, and the majority of people who grew up with it. But we were wrong, because the actual phrase of it goes, "There's a snake in my boots." It was plural, and it was never singular. But of course, the internet didn't agree with this, with the biggest reason being that it grammatically doesn't make sense. The proper sentence should be, "There are snakes in my boots." And it also doesn't help with the fact that the Woody toys that came out all say, "There's a snake in my boot." There is no plural for those, so what gives? There was only one Reddit comment claiming that Pixar confirmed it's always been boot and not boots, but I haven't been able to find an article on that. How do you guys remember it? Tell me down in the comments below. Imagine finding a watch while you're exploring a tomb. Of course, watches have been around for quite a while at this point, but what makes the famous tiny Swiss watch so special? In 2008, archaeologists discovered a remarkable piece of metal that was the size of a ring, bearing the face of a watch that was marked specifically at 10:06. On the back was the word Swiss engraved. This was found in a tomb that had been sealed away for more than 400 years, and yet this watch was only 100 years old. How is that possible? Especially when Switzerland wasn't an established country at the time. The tomb was speculated to have been created during the Ming Dynasty that ruled from 1368 to 1644, and watches were apparently not a thing in that area at the time. My question, however, though, is how sure are we that it was sealed for that long? What are the odds that someone had gone in there prior to the archaeologist, but just decided on not taking or touching anything? It's possible, but then why did they leave the watch ring? People obviously speculate that there were maybe time travelers that left it as a clue for their existence, since many of those already exist across the internet. People love to believe we live in a simulation, with major ones being caught when watching sports. This specific video, uploaded by Highlight Heaven on YouTube, arranged a variety of clips from football that feed into this simulation theory, and there were a few that stuck out to me. The first two clips involve some very synchronized movement of football players getting up. Simultaneously, at the exact same time, their movements are mirrored perfectly, down to the hand placements, to the tempo, you name it. The biggest one that people have their eyes on is when one of the football players does this really weird, almost floating maneuver to get up. They barely use their hands as they hoist themselves from off the ground, as if all their power is coming from the balls of their feet. Sure, they have the momentum of pushing upward, but after that it looks like it's all in the foot power. But I do have a theory for these weird movements, to which I feel many of you have figured out by now. Football players are constantly practicing and drilling in certain movements, right? They've also probably been practicing the quickest and most efficient way of getting up when they get tackled, with one of these ways being the weird floating technique. I'm not a football player, but I've taken movement classes where we are drilled in certain ways of getting up properly and quickly. It's definitely a neat trick that these guys do here, and I can see how it would become an optical illusion at certain angles. The man from Torrid. I'm not sure how legit this story is, but still interesting nonetheless. On one sunny day somewhere in July in 1954, an ordinary-looking man arrived at Haneda Airport in Tokyo. There was nothing strange about the way he was dressed, sporting a nice suit and tie with a groomed beard. He was fairly familiar with Japanese, so no red flags thus far. It wasn't until officials noticed on his passport that he was coming from a country called Torrid. There is no such thing as Torrid, that we're all aware of, and when this man was confronted by police as a possible fraud or threat, he got extremely frustrated and tried to explain that it is in fact real and has been around for 1,000 years. So they got him to try and explain where on the map it was located, and apparently it was supposed to be between Spain and France, but he had no idea why it wasn't showing up on our maps, as he kept repeating he's made multiple trips to Japan before. He even had papers to support his case. However, before they could take a look at them, the man suddenly disappeared from his hotel hotel room, one that was located on the 7th floor with no balcony. The police tried to keep him there while they figured things out, so they had no clue where he went. A lot of people use this theory to support the claims of parallel universes, but I don't know. It sounds a little too good of a story to be true.
Starting off this list today, we have the disappearance of the L8 blimp crew. The L8 blimp incident remains one of the most baffling unsolved mysteries from World War II. The blimp was initially on a patrol mission to scout for enemy submarines along the California coast. As it returned, something very unforeseen occurred. Observers on the ground noticed the blimp's erratic behavior before its descent, yet no distress signals were sent from the crew. Upon investigation, all control systems within the blimp were found operational, and personal belongings of the crew were still on board, suggesting a very sudden and unexplained disappearance. What makes this case even more intriguing is that the blimp managed to navigate and land in a densely populated area without causing significant damage or injury, almost as if it were being controlled or guided by unseen hands. The absence of any struggle or attempt to communicate by the crew has fueled speculation about paranormal activities, including theories of abduction or unintentional travel to another dimension. Despite various investigations and inquiries, no conclusive explanation has been provided, leaving the fate of the crew a mystery and a source of speculation about the potential for anomalies or breaches in our understanding of space and time. Next up on our list today, we have the Liverpool time slips. So this is something I didn't know, but apparently there is a phenomenon of time slips in Liverpool, particularly around the area known as Bold Street. These experiences typically involve individuals or groups of people feeling as though they have momentarily stepped back in time, encountering surroundings, people, and objects that appear to be from a different era. In the case of a policeman named Frank, he described seeing cars, fashion, and shop fronts that were all distinctly from the 1960s, a very stark contrast to the 1990s environment that he had come from. Even more intriguingly, upon returning to the present, he could find no logical explanation for his experience, as everything in his surroundings had returned to normal. Such incidents raise questions about the nature of time and reality. Are these time slips just hallucinations, or do they offer a glimpse into a parallel universe or an alternate reality that momentarily overlaps with our own? While definitive scientific explanations remain elusive, these experiences continue to provoke curiosity, suggesting a world that is much more complex and mysterious than our conventional understanding may allow. Next up, we have the mystery of Gadianton Canyon. In 1972, the journey of 4 university women took an eerie turn when they opted for a shortcut through Gadianton Canyon, hoping to shorten their trip back to Southern Utah University from Nevada. As they ventured deep into the canyon, the familiar desert landscape transformed inexplicably into an alien terrain, marked by an unsettling quiet that blanketed the area. The road beneath them changed to gravel, and the surroundings became increasingly unfamiliar and very foreboding. The group encountered structures that defied conventional architecture, featuring angles and materials that seemed out of place and time. Most unsettling were the egg-shaped vehicles with elongated, opaque windows, unlike any cars or machinery known at the time, seemingly parked or abandoned. These elements contributed to a palpable sense of dislocation, and there was an overwhelming sense of dread. Despite the urge to explore or understand their bizarre surroundings, fear and survival instincts prevailed, prompting the girls to get out of there as fast as humanly possible. Miraculously, as they retraced their route, the surreal landscape gave way to the familiar high desert scenery of southern Utah, though no clear boundary marked the transition. Subsequent attempts to locate the strange road and its surroundings ended in vain, as no maps or local accounts could verify the existence of the places and objects they reported seeing. This very strange experience led the women, and those who later heard their story, to speculate that they might have inadvertently crossed into a parallel dimension, a brief glimpse into an alternate reality abruptly encountered and then left behind. Next up today, we have the Vanishing Hotel. A French couple traveling in the 1970s decided to stay at a quaint, seemingly out-of-place hotel in the countryside. The hotel and its staff appeared to belong to an earlier time, and the couple noted peculiarities such as the absence of telephones or modern amenities amenities. I feel like that's a really big red flag. I don't know. No telephones at a hotel? What is this, Norman Bates? Upon trying to find the hotel again on a subsequent trip, it was nowhere to be found, and no one in the area could recall its existence, suggesting a possible slip into a parallel world. At our halfway point today, we have the interdimensional ring. A person reported finding a very unique ring that did not belong to them in their home. Despite thorough investigations, they could not trace the ring's origins or how it came into their possession. You just know that somebody in that household was getting accused of cheating in that moment. The mysterious ring appeared to possess unusual characteristics and design unlike any common jewelry. Its style did not match any known era or culture, which only deepened the mystery surrounding it. As the person wore the ring, peculiar incidents began to unfold. Objects in their home seemed to move independently, and time appeared to distort, with hours passing in what felt like minutes. On several occasions, the wearer claimed to see fleeting glimpses of otherworldly landscapes or to hear whispers in an unrecognizable language. These experiences intensified the belief that the ring was not merely an object of unknown provenance, but a conduit to parallel dimensions, offering brief, disorienting peeks into these alternate realities that coexist with our own. Would you want a ring with that kind of power, or would you journey across the land to destroy it in a fiery pit?
And that's not the only supposed time traveler captured on camera. There's also the story of Chaplin's time traveler. Take a look at this video here and see if you can spot anything odd, aside from the zebra statue. Yeah, see the woman walking in the background? Looks like she's holding something to her ear, right? Almost like a cell phone. Now, it's easy to look past this. I mean, cell phones are so common now that they almost seem like extensions of our bodies, but yeah, people didn't have cell phones back in the 1920s. In case you didn't know. Back in October of 2010, a filmmaker named George Clark uploaded a clip to YouTube titled Chaplin's Time Traveler. In the video, he's analyzing a bonus feature from the 1928 Charlie Chaplin movie The Circus. The clip shows footage from the movie's Los Angeles premiere, and if you look closely, there's that woman walking by holding what appears to be a strange device to her ear. Clark thought she was talking into a mobile phone, something that definitely wouldn't have existed in 1928. So it got people talking. Was this footage of a time traveler? Had this woman slipped into an alternate timeline from the future? Well, it's probably exactly what happened, but some people have some other, more out there ideas. Nicholas Jackson, for example, an associate editor at The Atlantic, pointed out that the woman could have just been using a portable hearing aid. This was a very new piece of technology at the time, so it wasn't common to see, but it is possible. But, I mean, isn't time travel, or the idea that this was a woman crossed over from another reality, more plausible to you than an old-timey hearing aid? Well, we're finally here. I've done videos on the channel before talking about the Mandela effect without ever directly discussing one of the most famous of all time, the Darth Vader Luke I am your father line. While considering James Earl Jones just recently passed away, and the title of the video being Parallel Universes Captured on Camera, I thought I'd give my 2 cents on this one. According to huge swaths of the population, the version of Star Wars we watch now is not the one we remember, and I'm not talking about all the George Lucas edits. This goes deeper, almost like the version we watched when we were young was from some alternate universe, or we've all slipped into an alternate universe ourselves. At least those of us that remember the line being Luke, I am your father, and not just no, I am your father. Considering this is one of the most famous movie moments in history, it really is strange how often people would get this wrong. Every Vader impression at recess began with Luke. Parodies would get the line wrong. One that sticks out to me is in Toy Story 2 with Zurg's line, no, Buzz, I am your father. So what's going on here? Are a bunch of us simply misremembering the line, or have we all really slipped into a galaxy far, far away? So this video was posted to Reddit by user Upstairs Cash 8400, and it's pretty bizarre. At first it just looks like an empty street with a bird in the sky until you realize that that bird's not moving. Then things get even stranger when we see a mother and son both looking up at the bird, completely confused about what they're seeing. So this is not just a glitch in the video. Now, sure, they could be part of a hoax, but if they are, they do a pretty good job of acting it out. What makes this so weird is that there's nothing behind the bird. It's just open air. It's not near a building. It's not like it could be a sculpture or something. It's just hovering. No strings, nothing. Definitely a bizarre one. And finally, we have the WOW signal. This mysterious radio signal was picked up in 1977 by an Ohio State University radio telescope, lasting just 72 seconds. It got its name from astronomer Jerry R. Amon, who wrote WOW next to the data printout. The signal's frequency and intensity were unlike anything we've seen from natural sources, leading some to speculate that it could have come from extraterrestrial life, but there's another theory that it might have come from a parallel universe. Something, whatever created this signal, could have dipped into a black hole and is now in a completely different universe. Of course, less exciting explanations like a passing comet or space debris haven't been ruled out either. While there's no definitive proof of anything, it's definitely worth checking out the recording. It's pretty spooky sounding. And we're starting off the list with the bubble universes theory. So imagine the universe right after the Big Bang, acting kind of like a giant balloon, rapidly inflating. This is the main concept of the cosmic inflation theory. According to this theory, the early universe expanded extremely quickly. Now here's where it gets kind of interesting. Picture this rapid expansion like different regions of the balloon inflating at their own speeds. In some areas, inflation happens a bit faster, in others, it's a bit slower. This creates pockets or bubbles within this expanding universe, kind of like different regions on the surface of the inflating balloon. In each of these bubbles, a unique set of physical laws and conditions takes shape. Each bubble becomes its own little universe with its own rules of how things work, its own arrangement of matter, energy, and who knows what else. Next up, we have cold spots. So imagine you're an astrophysicist looking at the vastness of space. Back in 2015, scientists in Hawaii noticed something strange, a huge empty patch where there should have been 10,000 galaxies. They call it a cold spot because it seemed like everything there had just vanished. Now, scientists at Durham University came up with a pretty fascinating idea about this mysterious cold spot. They think it might be because our universe collided with another universe, almost like two giant soap bubbles bumping into one another. When these universes collide, it could push all the energy and stuff out of a specific area, creating a big empty space, the cold spot. We might be living in one bubble universe out of trillions, and this cold spot could be the aftermath of a collision with another bubble universe. It's a bit like when two ripples in a pond meet and create a calm spot in the water. Alright, now this one is pretty cool, even though it has math in the title. It's the mathematical multiverse theory. This idea centers around the concept that our entire universe is like a giant cosmic equation, and every bit of it, from tiny particles to vast galaxies, can be described and understood using math. Understood by other people and not by me, because math was just... I get sick even just saying the word. That's the core idea, though, behind the mathematical universe theory. This theory suggests that there are countless mathematical structures, and each one represents a different universe. Since there are infinite mathematical possibilities, this would also mean, in theory, an infinite number of universes. So think of it a bit like this. Our universe is just one solution to the grand mathematical equation that is existence. In this mathematical multiverse, each universe has its own unique set of rules and conditions, an infinite collection of parallel universes where physics and math can be totally different from what we know. For instance, one example I tend to use, in one universe, gravity might act in a way that pulls things sideways, while in another, it might pull things up. If you're unaware, our gravity pulls us down, but the possibilities are really endless in this theory. Next on the list, of course, black holes. I mean, we gotta talk about black holes in a video like this. Black holes are mysterious regions in space where gravity is so strong that nothing, even light, can escape their gravitational pull. In the traditional understanding, once something crosses the event horizon of a black hole, it seemingly is just gone forever, lost to the singularity at the center. But some physicists have a different idea that black holes could lead to parallel universes. It's called the wormhole hypothesis. This idea here is that a black hole could potentially connect to a white hole or another region of space-time through a tunnel-like structure called a wormhole. A white hole is a hypothetical region where matter and light are ejected, basically the opposite of a black hole. I mean, really, that is the opposite. So instead of being forever stuck inside the black hole, the matter and information falling into a black hole might be transferred through a wormhole to another region of space, or even a completely separate universe, almost acting like a bridge between our universe and a parallel one. Alright, the simulated multiverse theory. The simulated multiverse theory suggests that our entire universe is basically a massive computer simulation. Imagine our reality being like a highly advanced video game or computer program that we're just unknowingly living inside of, and everything we experience is generated by some incredibly powerful computer. Now, who could be the ones running this simulation? It could be extraterrestrial beings with highly advanced technology, or even humans from the far future running a simulation to learn about their own ancestry, like a gigantic virtual reality experiment. But if our universe is just one big simulation, there could be countless other simulations running simultaneously, each representing a separate universe with its own unique set of rules. Basically, it's just a bunch of alien children learning about us, and they're all just in their own little screens, watching different versions of it.
Next up, we have the flight into the future. In the 1930s, a British pilot claimed to have flown into a cloud bank only to emerge in what seemed to be the future. He described seeing unfamiliar aircraft and an altered landscape, but upon returning to his own time, he reported the incident, but unfortunately there was just no evidence to substantiate his experience. This story has been interpreted by some as a possible encounter with a time slip or a parallel dimension, but to me it really is just giving Manifest. I don't know if you guys have seen that show, but it's crazy, and I feel like maybe that show was based on what happened here. I don't know. Next up today we have the quantum thought exercise, just simultaneously my favorite and least favorite on this entire list, because it stresses me out. While not an anecdote of an actual event, the quantum thought experiment is often associated with the idea of quantum immortality and is related to the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. Imagine a situation similar to the Schrodinger's cat experiment, where a physicist uses a potentially lethal mechanism that is triggered or not triggered based on a quantum event, like the decay of a radioactive atom. Okay, I know it sounds confusing. Stay with me, alright? In this thought experiment, every time the mechanism has a chance to be triggered, the universe would split, creating one reality where the physicist survives and another where they do not. However, the physicist, as an observer, would only ever experience the outcomes where they survive, hence the term quantum immortality. They would seemingly jump from one universe to another where they continue living, never experiencing their own death. The idea here is that, from the physicist's perspective, they might feel as though they are transitioning into different parallel universes where they continue to exist. It is a very mind-bending concept that suggests that our consciousness could persist in a multiverse, experiencing only those branches of reality where we survive. It's interesting, scary, unsettling. I don't know, that's just how I feel about this one. We have the alternate phases of Highway 167. There are accounts of people driving on familiar roads only to find themselves in completely unfamiliar landscapes or towns that just should not exist along their route. One particular story involves Highway 167, where drivers reported entering foggy patches and emerging into surroundings that appeared to be from a different time period or just a completely different reality, only to return to their known world upon retracing their route. It's just so creepy. I feel like we've talked about like a few specific scenarios that kind of deal with the same thing before. Just is so unsettling. I don't know, there's just something weird about that. Next up, we have the man who woke up in a different marriage. This story is about a man who claimed to have woken up next to a woman he recognized, but in a life that wasn't his. He had memories of life with another woman, his actual wife, but in this new reality he was married to an old girlfriend. His job was different, and even his car in the driveway was not the one that he remembered. Despite extensive searches, he found no evidence of his former life and began to question his sanity until he suddenly returned to his original world with everything back to normal. This does sound like an absolute nightmare, but it also you know, sometimes people think like, what would have happened if like things went this way or whatever. So maybe it would be kind of cool to get like a glimpse. Okay, and finally today we have the non-existent hotel, back with another strange hotel experience. This one starts off with a businessman traveling in Europe in the 1970s who claims to have stayed at a beautiful old-fashioned hotel. Nothing wrong with that. Upon returning to the city years later, he was unable to find the hotel. In fact, there were actually no records or evidence that it ever even existed. He even checked his old receipts and documents, which all referenced the hotel, yet no one in the city had any memory of such a place. This led him to believe that he might have spent a night in a parallel dimension. Imagine, you went to this mystery hotel and later realized you were staying in room 1408. Could you imagine? Oh, I would think that my whole life was a lie after that.